Hey everybody, welcome to New Zealand's biggest gap year. It's an epic challenge that my partner Laura and I decided to tackle a few years back. The challenge, 365 activities all around New Zealand in 365 days. And today we are joining a genuine Maori tour in the Hawke's Bay area. You won't want to miss it. Catch up with me at the end of the video once the show is done. This morning we are leaving the Archie's Bunker in Napier. That's the hostel that we are staying at during our exploration of the area, and we are heading to the township of Waimarama where we are waiting for a tour guide.
We are joining Robert from Waimarama Maori Tours to have a real authentic Maori experience in the Hawke's Bay area. The first place we're stopping at is the Waimarama beach, where he's telling us more about the tribes of the Hawke's Bay area and how diverse they are.
You came from Napier, right?
Yes.
Now, in coming from Napier, you would have come through almost 18 to 20 different tribal groups.
Oh,
you
wow.
know what I mean? So that just shows you the diversity that we're talking about.
Our first stop today is Waimarama Beach, which is where Robert's ancestors landed over 800 years ago when they sailed all the way from the Polynesian islands. I have a lot of questions about this big trip, including how did they get water?
When you think about it, fresh water, but I mean, they would have relied heavily, I'm sure, on the rain, catching the rain, fresh water and things like that. So.
And I keep on asking Robert a heap of questions, and he has a ton of specific answers for me, which makes me wonder, how does he know all of that despite the fact that Maori don't have a written history? And the answer is pretty simple. It's all the stories that you've been told as a kid. All those Maori legends are passed on from generation to generation, and there is also a lot of clues that can be found on Maori carvings. But we are already moving on to the next destination of our tour, which is the Hakikino Pā site. It's a 15th century Pā site, and Robert explains to us that before we are stepping onto this sacred ground, he needs to do a porphyry.
It doesn't matter if you're the Prime Minister or, the Queen of England, or whether it's just you two. We have to make it safe, and that's what a porphyry does. Do you get what I mean? All of these places, for us and our people here, we're still fairly basic in the belief that we have to make sure that the spiritual guardians know who you are and why you're here.
As we make our way to the entrance of the Pā site, Robert shows us a cabbage tree, otherwise known as a kauka in Maori, and this was one of the early food sources for the Maori.
I'll take a little. It's got a sort of a. It's not a nice taste, but it's a bearable taste.
It's actually bearable, yeah.
It's actually not that terrible, yeah.
Yes.
We then move on to the resting area of the Pā site, where Robert is performing the porphyry, which is a traditional welcoming ceremony in Maori, and he is giving a speech in the Maori language to his ancestors, basically welcoming us onto the land. Robin gives his speech to represent our little tribe here, and then we become reunited, both sitting on the same side of the resting area, where Robert is telling us some more stories and legends surrounding his tribe. He also tells us what exactly is a Pā site, and a Pā site is a traditional fortified Maori village. And this Pā site is particularly beautiful, surrounded by forest with lots of birds, as you could see by that feather I was holding, and we even spot the rare New Zealand falcon. After doing a beautiful bushwalk, we arrive in an area with tall fences and beautiful Maori carvings which depict ancestors and are used to tell stories about the old days. And Robert is telling us more about the area, including a platform where they used to fly kites to communicate with other people around the area. That is something we had no idea about.
As we are sitting right here in front of those beautiful carvings, listening to Robert's stories, he's telling us all about what usually the legends are about. And it's always a love story, because it's always a love story. There is always a girl. We then move on to the tuna, which is the Maori word for eels. Eels were a very important food source for early Maoris because that was basically their main source of protein. It's also a delicacy. It tastes absolutely different than anything you've tried, especially cooked by a chief.
So now we're moving on to the marae.
But before we move on to the marae, Robert takes the time to give us a bit of the etiquette on how to behave when visiting a living marae. Because yes, this time we're going to be visiting a living one. People are studying, working and living in this place. We finally arrived to the Marae, which is the Maori meeting place, and it looks absolutely stunning. There are paintings everywhere from local artists, and each of those paintings have their own story, including one that we know.
What was interesting is that the hawk that you saw up there, that's her animal guardian. So you saw one of the guardians around.
We see more amazing and vibrant paintings around the Marae, but these are not the only paintings we're going to be checking out, because our final destination today is at Robert's house, where he has an amazing display of his ancestors' portraits. And this just goes to show how important ancestry is in the Maori culture. It really shows an in-depth history. And the tour ends like every great tour should end, with some kawa kawa tea, which is a native plant that Robin munched on in the Abel Tasman National Park.
Kawa kawa, don't mention it, make it tea.
When he said he was...
This tour was absolutely awesome. We learned so much. But moving on from hanging out with locals, we're going to be hanging out with even more locals. We are meeting up with some friends which are living in Napier, and we're asking them to take us to the best place to watch the sunset. However, it's really cloudy today, so we end up going to the bar, and you know what that means. We are drinking a little too much, we are bantering a little too much, and we're having an awesome evening. That's what we call it.
It's pretty slow. There you go. How slow is it, Simon?
It's quite slow.
On a scale of 1 to pretty, how slow is it?
Probably a 6.3.
So it's 6.3, pretty slow.
Slow, definitely slow. It just keeps on going and going. Not that it's a long train, but it is a very slow one.
Alright everybody, I hope that you enjoyed this tour. We certainly did. I mean, how much more genuine does it get when you literally go inside the house of the guy? That's really good. However, one of the issues with this tour is that it's really not popular. Not that many people know about it. It is great, but nobody knows about it. So therefore, we had literally no comments and a very small amount of views on the video when we published it first. But that's okay. That's kind of what we do here at NZ Pocket Guide. Our job is to unearth some of the most amazing hidden gems for you to be able to discover on your trip to New Zealand. So that's why we are running New Zealand's largest travel guide. It's called NZPocketGuide.com, and it's entirely free for you to use, so you may want to check that out when planning your trip to New Zealand. And there is a ton of hidden gems, tips, everything you need to plan your trip to New Zealand, literally all in one spot. So you'll be impressed when you get on there. If you need to connect with us and you want to ask us some questions about traveling around New Zealand, you can join us during one of our live sessions. So every week at 8 a.m. New Zealand time on Sunday, we are here for 1 hour to answer all your questions about traveling in New Zealand. So if you have a question of your own, just join us. It's a lot of fun, and you just type anything you want in the chat and we'll usually answer all your questions, as long as it has something to do with traveling in New Zealand. Of course, if it's nonsense, we don't tend to read nonsense. Alright, if you want to say thank you for all our hard work, hit like and subscribe and all the buttons at the bottom of these videos. It's good metrics apparently. And if you want to join us on Patreon, it's only less than a cup of coffee a month, the cost, and you get access to a lot of really cool perks, such as PDF travel guides, access to a secret Facebook group where we hang out with you guys all the time, and an extra 1 hour live session every week, and much more. So check that out, and in the meantime, keep traveling awesome, stay safe, and have a lovely day. Bye bye.